In this video, I'm gonna take you behind the scenes and show you everything that I would want as an editor from a shooter in terms of coverage for an event, as well as some stylistic choices as to what lenses I would use and the framing that I'm looking for in order to get enough coverage for an event. If you're new here, my name's Javier Mercedes. I do video tech tutorials and gear reviews on this channel. If you're into that, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave me a comment down below on what you want me to do a video on next. In this video particularly, this is from many moons ago when I was a videographer for the Chive, and I was getting some event coverage for Chive TV in a pop-up that they had for South by Southwest. So I'm gonna go through my timeline and showcase to you why I shot what I shot that day. So we have this Chive TV thing right here on this sign. So let's see what we get. The only thing that this shot really has going for it is that the Chive TV is in a third and it's in focus with a blurry background. Now I could add some titles over to the right, but there's so much more that we could add dynamically to this shot. Let me show you what I mean. What I think makes this shot better than the previous is that people are filling up the movement of the frame. I'm moving to the left. This pair of guys is moving towards me, and there's another person in the background moving away from the camera. Not only that, but the guy coming by the camera is physically looking towards the Chive TV decal. As they exit frame, the Chive TV logo is left as the center of attention for the viewer. Moving along, I want to get a master shot of the big C of the Chive, and I think I want to get it from across the street so I can compress down on the image. If you have the time, it's always great to get coverage of the same object at different focal lengths. So shooting wide at 24mm gives you the action on the street, but punched into 70mm gives a completely different feel to what's going on in the frame. There's some grates down here, so I think I'm gonna try and shoot them to establish a depth of field. Just waiting for some action to go by. Again, I'm shooting wide at 24mm, but now I have the metal grate in front of the camera to establish a depth of field since it's blurry in the foreground. I'm also moving to the left in parallel motion with most of the people in the frame. Just waiting for somebody to go by on their bike. I was lucky enough to grab a shot of a guy looking at the event as he crossed the screen. But one other thing to point out is zoomed into 70mm, that metal grate that's in front of the camera, you can only spot a little bit of the blurriness in the left of the frame, but it's just enough to establish that depth that makes a shot just a little bit more dynamic and better than just an average shot. Punched in even more, here's at 200mm. With a 14mm, I think you get a lot of action on the street, but I think it's a little too wide because the event itself that I'm covering is a little too small in the frame. All right, we're gonna head inside. Moving inside the venue, I decided to keep the 14mm on the camera to get some wide establishing shots of the interior. Again, I think it adds more to a shot if you wait for somebody to be walking in frame. Got it. With all the natural light in the venue, it was still a little too dark at f2.8, and I wanted to get some isolation shots at an even shallower depth of field to give that cinematic feel. See how that looks. So I switched over to the Sony 55 f1.8. which does a great job of isolating the focus on that Bill Murray decal in the center of the frame, but I think you could better represent the product by rearranging it on the table. I think this framing has way more depth, and you can see the whole decal in the shot. And there's subtle movement from the person in the background that doesn't distract from the product in focus. Continuing on, I got a couple more isolation shots at the table, and I really love that natural backlight that was coming in from the window and how it accentuated the little dust particles that were floating around. One challenge I think a lot of shooters and editors have to deal with is getting the idea of some big object in the frame if you're using some sort of shallow depth of field prime lens like the 55. In this example, there's this saying that says, there is no elevator to success, you have to take the stairs. And it's tough to get all of that in slow-mo or portray the whole thing without doing something like a tilt of the camera. Other options could be that I shoot with a wider lens or shoot at f22 to make sure everything's in focus. But I think having a shallow depth of field is what makes a shot look more professional. So if anybody out there has better ideas of how to get these kinds of shots as opposed to doing a tilt, I would love to hear it in the comments down below. Up on this balcony, I found a cool frame where I could film the projection of the Chive TV logo on the wall, but I wanted to have some action in the background. So I'm directing one of the people down below to walk across frame while I'm shooting the Chive TV logo. The first time I noticed that she looked up at the camera, so I had her redo the take, and now we have something like this. I think that works. And while we're up here, why not get another reveal shot? Crispiness as crispy does, or however you want to take your Rice Krispies in terms of metaphors for B-roll shots.
There's this truck for your finger to fit in. It's really cool.
It's the small things in life that you really appreciate about video cameras. Moving on. Stepping outside, I started to film the different music acts that were going on that day. Getting out the 70 to 200, I think, allows you to compress down on the image and have a narrow field of vision that you want the viewer to look at. The fans spinning up top added a nice little texture to the composition of these shots, but I wanted to experiment more with punching in on the musicians and showcasing them in different thirds of the frame. Switching back to the 14mm wide angle, I wanted to see what I could get creatively in this same situation. Here's a typical reveal shot as I use the audio speaker blurry in the foreground as I move upward to reveal what the focus of this shot really is, that musician playing the guitar. Stepping around to behind the musician gives a great perspective shot of what's going on. I wanted to get more depth of field perspective for this shot, so I moved it down to an upward angle behind the drums so they're a little blurry in the foreground, while you still get the musician playing out to the crowd in focus. Back out front, I have the same problem that I did on the stairs, where I can't get the full C in the frame, so I start to step back, and this allows me to have depth of field by people walking by the camera or using the little entryway, with the C kind of isolated off in focus by these walls on the side. One thing I don't mind when getting shots like this is if somebody walks by my frame, because I can use the person as a wipe to another shot if I wanted to in post. And it'd look a little something like this. Obviously that was a very rough mask, but you get the point. Here I'm staging a shot where I want to showcase some fun with people posing on the Chive C. This is a very typical reveal fun shot that I think could be used for a lot of different assets in the future. And since I had these two already, I framed up a couple more poses that I think could be helpful in the future, or at least give some variation in the edit for which shot I would want to use of these two. Now I think this is a very satisfying shot. I also think it's necessary to capture the atmosphere of what's going on around the event. So out on the street, I got some B-roll shots of crowd and just some different distinguishable shots of Austin, Texas. Overexposed shots. I forgot to mention one of the big attributes of using something like the Sony FS7 is an ND filter. So in order to get these nice shallow depth of field shots outdoors with so much sunlight, at f1.8 you need to be using an ND filter. And the beauty of using the FS7 is that it has internal ND filters. So when it comes to filming an event and you need to capture a person, place, or thing, in fact, if you're going to be doing an event, you're probably going to be filming all of those things. Here are some things to remember. Try and fill your frame with movement, but don't make it too complicated where the viewer gets confused on what they should be focusing on. Establish a depth of field. Now, an easy way to do this is to utilize something like a 50mm prime lens and shoot it at f1.8. Most 50 primes can go down to f1.4. This gives you that shallow depth of field, but to take this a step further, you need to put things in different Z-planes of your shot, meaning that there needs to be objects close to you in frame, objects far away, and objects in the center. All of these objects at different distances gives the viewer a better perspective of what's going on screen. Cover the specific person, place, or thing that you're filming at different angles and different focal lengths. A wide-angle lens will give the viewer more perspective of what's going on around whatever's supposed to be in focus, and a telephoto lens is going to be punching in on isolated shots of what you really want the viewer to focus in on. Don't forget about the reveal shot by using walls or items in front of you to reveal whatever you want to come into frame and the viewer to focus on. Use the rule of thirds to put your subject in different thirds of the frame. That could be center, right, or left, but these all give you options in post to work with. If the current framing of your shot just isn't working with anything that you're trying, try moving the actual object or whatever it is that you're filming into a different spot, like I did with that Bill Murray decal. It's not bad if people are walking across your camera, because you could always use that as a transitional wipe later on in post. Don't forget to capture the atmosphere outside the event, maybe people coming in, going out in line. And especially don't forget to get an establishing shot of, if you're filming in a building, the actual building itself. Now, I didn't have a drone with me at this time, but drone shots always work best for this kind of shot. I didn't really talk about this in the beginning of the video, but I think it goes without saying that people love to watch slow-mo video. And I think this is because as humans, we just view everything in real time. And when you get the chance to see an action in slow motion, you can really dissect how people are moving or whatever the action is on screen. It just looks cooler, I would say 90% of the time. And also that tip about if you're shooting outside and you want to get a shallow depth of field, you should always pack some ND filters, or like I said, the Sony FS7, which is awesome, has internal ND filters. But what about you? What are some of your tips for getting B-roll during an event? If you want to go behind the scenes and take a look at my workflow when I was working for CBS as an editor during March Madness, you can see how we put together videos for broadcast there. And there's probably a video that you would love to click on right there as well. Until next video, I hope you guys are out there living a life of abundance, and go ahead and click one of those other videos. Leave a like on the video. You could subscribe. I always say all these things to do at the end of a video. I hope you did one. All right, love you.